Well, hello once again and welcome back to my Vintage Dirt Bike YouTube channel, where we browse over more iconic classic motocross bikes from the 1970s and 1980s. Now in this particular featured video we're going to check out Peter Maxwell's very nice 1974 TM100 Suzuki. Now, back in the early 1970s, the schoolboy motocross scene was beginning to gather pace, and there was a huge interest of younger riders looking for competitive race bikes, as racing clubs for schoolboys were springing up at an unprecedented rate. Now, Suzuki then tried to fill that demand by introducing this TM100 machine, which was basically a TM125 with a smaller bore. Now, Suzuki's thinking was that if they could get younger riders to buy these smaller capacity machines, then that could eventually lead to these riders buying some of Suzuki's bigger adult race bikes as they grew older. Now, our particular bike's owner, Peter Maxwell, told me that this featured bike was actually imported from the United States. And Peter also said that he never did anything to this bike, and this is exactly the same condition he received the bike when it was shipped over. Now, whether the bike was restored or still in its original condition prior to being sent to the UK, I'm not entirely sure, although it's still a stunning little example of one of these Suzukis from back in the day. And I was actually very lucky to grab these pictures and some short video clips when the bike was wheeled out at the Drumlandvig Castle Scramble event in 2017. Now, these little TM100 machines had a 98cc two-stroke motor with a 5-speed gearbox. Now, as far as I can remember, the carburetor was a VM22 Mikuni carburetor fitted to these bikes, and that little Suzuki motor kicked out about 14 brake horsepower. Now, as you would expect, the little 100cc Suzuki engine was a buzzy little two-stroke mill and was very peaky and would rev to the moon and back, but you still had to keep your right hand working that throttle to keep the engine in its sweet spot. Now, these engines also had a standard wet multi-plate clutch with an electronic ignition system to provide the sparks. Now, these front forks were about as good as you could expect from a small capacity motocross machine from 1974, and these are just your standard telescopic oil damped units that looked to me like they would just break at the first sign of an obstacle on the track, as they looked so flimsy. But nevertheless, he still managed about 6 inches of travel, which was good enough for most schoolboys' racetracks. Now, although our featured machine looks almost an original bike from 1974, I'm not sure if these shocks were an original fitment from back in the day, but nonetheless, these rear shocks with these alloy canisters on the bottom certainly look the part on this little bike. Now, the rear shocks are not a particular manufacturer's make that I have come across here in the UK, so I'm almost assuming that these Red Wing MX 340s are, of course, an American manufactured set of rear shocks. Now, back in 1974, these little Suzuki TM100s had a steel fuel tank which held about 1.3 gallons of fuel. Although remember, this bike also had a separate oil tank for its two-stroke oil. Now of course these little TM100s had the CCI oil lubrication system for the two-stroke oil, which was pumped in separately to the engine through this tank on the side panel, rather than having the two-stroke oil pre-mixed and then added to the fuel tank. Of course, many of Suzuki's road bikes were also using this CCI two-stroke oil lubrication at this time, and this was quite unusual to have it fitted to a motocross machine. Now these TM100s also had a decent seat on them for a young rider in 1974, and they were a very good comfortable ride if the tracks of course weren't too bumpy. Now our particular little Suzuki looks like it's still sporting its original exhaust system. This exhaust system on our bike looks absolutely brand new. Doesn't look like this little bike has seen much action in the last few years. There's no dings or dents on the pipe. Of course the exhaust then leads up to this rear silencer system, to what I expect is a spark arrestor at the rear. This was designed to, of course, to stop any sparks from leaving the exhaust system. Now all of the other important parts on this bike, like the handlebars and the cables and levers, etc., look to me that they are all period correct and are more or less the original items from back in 1974. As you can see, no bar pads, and the fixed bar across the handlebars shows that these bars are original items from back in the day. But of course, if you were a young teenager back in 1974 and you could lay your hands on one of these beautiful little TM100s, then you would certainly be a happy chappy. If I remember correctly, still here in the UK in 1974 we were still racing the old BSA Bantams in the schoolboy class. That was of course just before we started to see the influx of the Japanese bikes like the Honda Elsinores coming into the UK. Of course, there are not many of these little TM100 screamers going around now, and it's a bike you virtually never ever see these days, and Peter has certainly got himself a piece of motocross racing history in this lovely TM100 from 1974. And there's another shot of that very unique CCI two-stroke oil lubrication system tank. Now these little bikes of course had 21-inch front wheels with the standard 18-inch wheel on the rear. Now the drum brakes were adequate for their day, with single leading shoes both front and rear. Now the stopping power wasn't great, but it was adequate for the day to stop this little 100cc machine. But whether this machine is original or not is neither here nor there in my opinion, although for me personally it's another vintage motocross classic, and I'm very happy featuring it here on my YouTube channel. So I hope you've enjoyed this latest bike from my classic dirt bike archives, and look out for many more similar machines to this lined up and all ready to feature on my channel very soon. And so I hope you continue to view my material here on my channel, and if you like the type of content I am posting, you can also subscribe to my channel by clicking on the red button at the bottom right hand side of your YouTube viewer. But thanks again for watching, and look out for more of these classic dirt bike machines coming soon. This video was brought to you in association with WorldSport, the world's #1 supplier for all your off-road and leisure sportswear. Just visit their online website for more details.